Well, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. You're watching discussion today with me, Rajat Kane. In this episode, we'll take up the subject of Indo-US energy ties as the two countries have decided to revamp the existing energy cooperation framework to focus more on clean energy. Well, they have decided to revamp the Indo-US Strategic Energy Partnership, or in short SEP. Through these pillars, the United Nations and India are working to strengthen and modernize power grid and distribution utilities for clean, affordable and reliable energy access, improve efficiency, flexibility and environmental performance in the power sector, promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth through long-term energy requirement. Well, earlier two SEPs were held under the previous US administration of previous US President Donald Trump, where focus of energy cooperation was more on supply of fossil fuels from US rather than cooperation in reducing carbon footprints. While the imports of fossil fuel from the US will continue, Washington will support energy's efforts for clean energy. That's what the reports have come. So now, how important are the SEP and how important is partnership between India and US in the endeavor for clean energy? Well, discuss more on this. We are joined with panel of two guests, Mr. Dilip Sinha, former ambassador, and Prachi Gupta. She is consultant Niti Ayog. Well, many thanks for joining us. Let me start with you, Ambassador Gupta. Ambassador Sinha, I beg your pardon. Sir, how important in the perspective of a clean energy are, say, partnership between India and US in terms of, the size of the consumption, the size of the market, and of course, given the requirement of these two countries?
I think this is a very important cooperation that is taking place between India and the US. As you yourself mentioned, this group was set up, this partnership was set up 3 years ago.
Right.
And the initial focus was on India's energy security and diversification, and it served the immediate purpose of diversifying our sources of oil imports. And the result was that the US rose to becoming the second largest supplier of oil to India. But now the focus has shifted to renewables and to cleaner technologies. And this is extremely important because for both India and the US, this is an area of great importance. We have to understand that the future, especially for India, lies in developing new technologies because its needs are immense. And clearly, fossil fuels are not going to be the engine of India's growth in the future. And for the US, which is one of the largest, the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and is historically responsible for almost a quarter of the gases emitted, it's important to lead in the development of clean technologies. And this will be a path that the two countries can go down together in developing new technologies, which is what the emphasis of this new partnership is now.
Right, absolutely. Many thanks, Ambassador Sinha, for your opening remarks. Prachi Gupta, your reaction, say first up to begin the show, the importance these two countries attach to each other in terms of clean fuel on the indicators of the consumption, population, and of course requirement in future.
Yeah, definitely. I think India and US definitely have a strong road ahead. If you look at, as you mentioned, there have been two meetings earlier on the strategic energy partnership. I'll just give a quick background in terms of, so there are 4 pillars under this existing strategic energy partnership. And as Mr. Dilip also highlighted, earlier the focus was more on energy security. So we have one oil and gas pillar. The second pillar is power and energy efficiency. And the third pillar is new and renewable energy. And the fourth pillar is sustainable growth pillar. So the sustainable growth pillar is being headed by Niti Ayog in partnership with USA. So these 4 pillars were focusing on different aspects, but given that the US government would be coming back to the Paris Agreement, there is a lot more scope and given that India has a potential for growth in terms of energy demand, our energy demand is expected to be twice in the coming next 10 to 15 years. And given that India wants to move on a low carbon trajectory, I think the government is very well revamping the existing framework and looking at, partnering towards cleaner technologies, towards clean tech R&D, and then, potentially getting, developing more financing mechanisms to actually deliver finance to where it is needed in terms of low carbon technologies, or whether it's energy efficiency, or whether it's in the coal sector, whether we talk about coal gasification or cleaner utilization of coal
Right.
from coal to chemicals. So I think there are different areas, particularly with respect to low carbon pathways, that we talk about. So given that US has the strength in terms of technologies and R&D, and India has the potential to increase its energy demand and a skilled labor force, so I think definitely it's a win-win situation for both the countries.
Prachi, before moving on, we attach a lot of importance to Paris Agreement now since US is also back over there. I mean, how much of the dynamics you think it will help in achieving the larger target of say, Paris Agreement?
Yeah, I think, for example, if we look with respect to climate change as a broader goal, so US, given that it's one of the largest greenhouse gas emitters, and India is the third largest emitter, but in terms of per capita consumption, we are quite low. I think Paris Agreement stands a testimony to some of the goals, the nationally determined contributions that each of the country has set up. And India is already on track of meeting those NDC targets. So Paris Agreement, I would say, it gives a framework for all the countries to I would say, fulfill their commitments to the overall broader objective of fighting climate change. So definitely US coming back to this would be a good move, and I would say, it would be a motivational move for the countries across the globe to actually, fulfill their NDC commitments.
Right, right, right. Well, Ambassador Sinha, I mean, talking of cleaner energies and of course like ecological balance, how these two factors are correlated, and if you talk in the broader sense with Paris Agreement, would you see things back on the track which perhaps was missing after the exit of US?
Well, the US's departure was obviously a great setback to the entire global climate movement. And the fact that it is back is a great help to everybody, because you cannot possibly address the problem of climate change with the US not being on board.
Right.
As far as India is concerned, we are, in terms of our goals that we have set for ourselves for the Paris Agreement, we are on track for that. But that clearly is not enough for us, even for our own needs.
Okay.
And that is primarily because our per capita consumption is extremely low. Our overall consumption is extremely low, and we have to increase our consumption if we wish to industrialize. But in our future industrialization, fossil fuels cannot be the engine of growth, because whether it is in terms of our Paris Agreement targets or it is in terms of our own climate position today, where a large number of our cities are extremely polluted, and if we increase our carbon emissions, we will face the consequences ourselves, regardless of what the rest of the world does. So we have to understand that one, in terms of coal, which is our primary source of energy in the country, and for which we are dependent for almost over half our energy requirements, we have to develop and adopt new technologies, get new investment. And as far as future investment is concerned, we have to go in for renewables. And in both these, India and the US can collaborate. As Prachi mentioned, the US has a very strong R&D base. India can collaborate with the US. The US also has coal technologies, especially the advanced coal technologies for power generation, which we need to invest. So all these things put together call for a greater partnership between India and the US to enable our energy needs to be met and the global targets for emissions to be met.
Prachi, like both of you agree that we are still dependent on conventional fuel in terms of meeting our energy requirement. What has been a reason so far that we are still depending on more conventional, modes of fuels for this requirement?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for it. One, up till now, the renewable energy technologies were not cost effective. So if you look at the cost of solar photovoltaic panels, they've drastically reduced over the last decade or so. So it's one, I would say it's about the economics of the available technology. So till now, if you look at the industrialized countries, they have grown on the base of coal, they've grown on the base of oil, because that was most economical. But now, given that we are at par in terms of tariffs, levelized cost of electricity, of greener fuels, I would say alternate energy as well, I think India has taken up quite significant steps. So 151% increase in penetration of renewable energy we have seen over the last 5 to 6 years. So it's one, I would say it's about the costs, and second, I would say it's also about the stage where the technology is at. So the cleaner technologies, solar and wind, are already in the commercialization stage, are at par in terms of costs. But given that some of the alternate technologies still are not cost effective, and still are a lot of them are still either in the R&D phase or in the commercialization phase. So, given that there is a lot of scope for development of clean technology R&D, we still have to depend on conventionals. And the third reason I would say is if we talk about grid. So if you look at the base load still has to be met through a conventional or a continuous supply of energy, which can only be provided either by coal or gas, or to an extent nuclear as well. So the penetration of renewables to the grid today, if we look, it's approximately 37% installed capacity we have. But there's a limit to what renewables can also, there's a limit to what renewables can supply in terms of power to the grid, unless there's not a base load to meet that electricity demand. So we need storage solutions. And that is, and storage, as of now, there was around a tariff of 4 rupees per unit that we have achieved solar plus storage. So I think it's about the cost, it's about the stage where the technologies are at, and it's about eventually, meeting that base load through a continuous supply where storage solutions will play a critical role. So that's why we have been dependent on conventionals till now, just like, the industrialized countries have grown on conventional fuels.
Right, Prachi. Many thanks for that detailed explanation. Ambassador Sinha, your take, why there is still dependence on conventional fuel going ahead, as Prachi has rightly put it, we really have to shift our focus. And of course, we have to work on the cost-intensive technology about the renewables. Do you see any challenges ahead?
Well, there are major challenges in renewables. The first is technological. The technology itself needs to be advanced, whether it is solar or it is wind or the other renewable sources. The most promising source is hydrogen, where the technology is still in a fairly elementary stage and needs to be advanced further. The other challenge that you face with renewables is the problem of finance. Now, the Paris Agreement had set up this global finance fund, but that is virtually lying empty. And one of the things that the SEP that we have with the US can do is to tap the private sector energy sources in the US, because the US is generally loath to use public sector money or government money for these purposes. And we have seen recently one of our leading solar companies listed itself in the US. Now, that is one way in which we can start tapping the vast financial energy sources of the US to meet our financial needs. The Global Climate Fund has, I think, just about $10 billion out of the promised $100 billion. So we have to shift our focus from these public sources or government-to-government sources to the private sector. And that is where the future lies for our private sector undertakings to tap finance and also to invest in research.
Prachi, in terms of making it cost-effective and getting in more investors into this business, you feel that the partnership between two countries, India and US, would be fruitful in this endeavor, especially if we talk of the SEP and of course while these two countries are focusing more on clean energy?
Yeah, definitely. I think, there's a lot of scope for partnership between India and US in some of these highlighted areas: clean technology R&D, scaling low carbon technologies. Then it's energy data management, which we are currently working on with respect to strengthening the energy data management in India. Currently, we have 5 energy ministries, and the data is among these 5 energy ministries. So, for example, US has an EIA, which is a centered energy data source. So that's one area that we are currently working on, and I think it has significant potential because we could take the best learning practices that EIA has already developed. And then other than that, I would say, as Mr. Dilip also highlighted, the financing area. So if we are able to unlock that finance, which is one of the major roadblocks to accelerate the clean penetration of cleaner technologies in India's energy mix, I think definitely there's a lot of potential in this partnership, and there are a lot of areas of collaboration that will not only help India accelerate its energy transition, energy transition to cleaner fuels, but also it would help in the US, because India is one of the most opportunistic markets at this moment, because India is
Right.
at the cusp of its energy transition. So definitely, I see a lot of potential between the two countries.
Well, energy transition, that's a word you've used here. That's a key here. Do you agree, Ambassador Sinha, the energy transition between, from the conventional to renewables, and that's what the entire game lies?
Oh, absolutely. The industrial age, as we know it so far for the last century and a half, has been based upon fossil fuels. And we have seen the impact of that. We are reeling under climate change. Uh, India, unfortunately, missed the bus on
Okay.
conventional fuels. Our installed capacity is still extremely low, whereas other countries were able to industrialize with conventional energy while this climate change problem had not yet started. Now we are in the midst of it. So if India has to move forward, it has to move forward in the newer technology areas. And I think that is possibly an opportunity for us, because instead of going down the old path and then taking a U-turn after 10 years, we should go down the path of new technologies and become the leader in this area. We
Okay.
have a young population, a talented population. If we focus our energies on new technologies, we'll be able to lead from the front instead of trying to follow the old path. If we leapfrog into the new technologies, it will accelerate our growth and make us a leader in the new technologies and the technologies of the future.
Prachi, you also agree that India missed the bus, as Ambassador Sinha puts it, in terms of the energy transition to more cleaner and renewable fuels. And if that is the case, how long will it take to actually catch up then at that distance which has to be traveled?
I think what he highlighted and what we missed is potentially the industrialization. So India is more a service-based economy. If you look at China, China has grown tremendously because of manufacturing, and that too relying on conventional fuels. So India currently, we look at our per capita consumption is 1/3 of the world average, and that has stayed like this for long. So we really did not miss the bus on renewables, I would say. Maybe
Okay.
solar PV manufacturing, which China has taken the lead. But the step that India has taken to transform its energy landscape, to integrate more renewables into the grid, even towards the end sectors, whether it's cooking, whether it's electric vehicles penetration in the transport sector, or it's in agriculture, penetrating solar off-grid farms. So India has I think taken significant measures. But what it needs to do is accelerate the pace. So the platform is set. There's a motivated government that wants to do it. There's a strong leadership that we have. So what India really missed was the industrialization story, which could have led to higher economic growth. But now that we are propelling towards a cleaner future and also getting into manufacturing, the government released the cabinet launched the performance-linked incentive scheme to manufacture the panels and to develop the entire supply chain, and the government is now actually focusing on Atmanirbhar Bharat. So it's reducing the import dependency and actually getting that supply chain to built and focusing on ensuring that the fuel mix is cleaner. So I think we really have a lot of opportunity going forward, and definitely it's going to be an uphill task. But I think we have set the base foundation right.
Right. As you say that government is focusing on Atmanirbhar Bharat, the Self-Reliance Initiative, will they be, of course, and how challenging there'll be a balancing act in terms of, say, being self-reliant in the fuel and, of course, say, involving partners in terms of the renewable energy sector?
I think it will be the entire supply chain. If it's meant for me, it will be. I think it's the entire supply chain from it's called like the cradle to grave. It's right from manufacturing to building a strong operational system down the line. So Atmanirbhar is about reducing our import dependency wherever we can, being self-sufficient in while tapping the domestic resources that we have. For example, in different states, we have in northeastern parts, some of the parts could be good in hydro and biomass. There's a lot of biomass potential in Punjab, so in Haryana. So if we tap our local resources and set the entire supply chain, infuse private partners, private players through, it could be through a PPP mode, or get more private players into clean technology, R&D, in finance, setting up those financing mechanisms to scale these technologies, and even the downstream sector. So I think that would be super helpful.
Right, right, Prachi. Sir, Ambassador Sinha, as we go towards the close of the show, sir, as we look forward towards the third SEP meeting between the two sides, India and US, what would be key issues on the table?
I think what we should focus on is one technology, that is mainly research and development in new technologies.
Right.
Focus on getting clean technologies for our coal plants, because we cannot dispense with these coal plants over the next several years. But at the same time, we need to clean up these power plants. And the third would be on tapping finance, because it's very important for our renewable energy to get finance from the private sector in the US. And if we focus upon these areas, then it will be possible for us to, one, clean up our existing power plants and move towards, as we expand our energy production, move towards cleaner technologies.
Right, right. Prachi, just your last remarks, your last take. I mean, as we look forward towards third SAP meeting sometime later, of course, like a couple of months' time, what would be there in the table as per you?
I definitely agree to the points that Mr. Dilip has highlighted. And in addition, I would like to say that potentially another area is industrial decarbonization, that India and US could closely work together to move towards low carbon pathways.
Right, right. Many thanks, Prachi Gupta from Niti Aayog. Many thanks, Ambassador Sinha, for, of course, elucidating on this extremely important aspect of cleaner fuel and, of course, like Indo-US ties on this issue of cleaner fuel. Well, that's it in this issue of discussion today. Many thanks for watching Sansad TV. Goodbye.